Hello again and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Imperial Guard Tactics video. Now before we get into today's video, I would like to say a huge thank you to the Knight of St. Juice for sending in some awesome pictures of his Death Court of Krieg. I think you've done a really good job of just capturing the gritty grimness that is the Death Court of Krieg. I mean, all the mud and the dark tones and all that good stuff, it just looks fantastic. Love the duck balls that you've done on some of the bases, all that good stuff. Just looks absolutely fantastic, and you've done a really good job of just capturing how grim it is to be in the Death Court of Krieg. Something I learned recently about them, which I hadn't appreciated, they're all like teenagers basically. If you're like a regular grenadier or something, it's something like not grenadier, regular guardsman. You're like between the age of like 16 and 18, and it's only if you survive for like a few rounds of combat you get to become like a grenadier, and then you might be in your 20s. It's pretty grim. It's pretty grim. It's like makes like being a white shield look like a good career choice. Anyway, thank you for sending these pictures in. If there's anyone else who's got any cool pictures they want me to use in my videos, please post them on my Facebook page, or you can email them to me at mordianglorytv@gmail.com. Without further ado, let's crack on with today's video. So today, guys, I want to talk about infantry squads. Oh, there goes Mordian Glory again, talking about bloody infantry squads. How many times are you going to remake the same video, mate? That's what I know you're saying. That's what I know you're thinking. But trust me, this one's going to be a quick tip tactica. This is going to be some extra feedback, some extra tactics, some extra thoughts on infantry squads now that we've had like Hammer of the Emperor and that all of our infantry squad upgrades are free. So in case you missed it, that's a really important one. Imperial Guard have had two key updates recently in the latest balanced data slate, patch, whatever you want to call it. Firstly, all of our infantry squad upgrades are free now. Okay, you just pay 60 points. So for some people who are running them bare bones, it's kind of a weirdly it's kind of a nerf, because you were paying 55 points and you were just using them for like screening and objectives and all that kind of stuff. And now you're having to pay 60 points, but you might not want to use any of those upgrades. So that's kind of like a weird thing. And at first when I heard people saying that, I didn't really agree with it. But now that I've been building some lists and trying some things out, I've realised actually that is kind of something you need to take into account. But you can easily adapt. So if you're taking like sponsons on a Lehman Rusted Marshal before, you drop those sponsons, you've literally got the points for, you know, to upgrade for your infantry squads. And now each one of those infantry squads is taking a heavy bolter. So now you've got 6 heavy bolters rather than like 2 heavy bolters. Stuff like that, for example. So there is ways around it. But one of the other big updates is Hammer of the Emperor. Now I've talked about this extensively, but I'll just cover it very quickly. Basically, every unit in the Guard has this, apart from Scions and Advisors and stuff like that. But all your regular Guard infantry stuff has this. If you get a 6 to hit in the shooting phase, it automatically wounds. That's from your las gun all the way up to your las cannon. Okay, if you get a 6 to hit, it auto wounds. And those two updates make for some really interesting sort of thinking and formulating and all this kind of stuff around. Formulating's not even a word. Anyway, interesting thoughts around infantry squads. Because essentially it now comes down to, do you want to take as many free upgrades as possible for the, like, so if you take like a las cannon, like a Voxcaster and plasma and all, and you take everything, you can get what essentially would have been a 90-point infantry squad for 60 points, which is incredible. That's really cool, right? But I've actually gone out and done some play testing here, and I've actually gone out and not only used infantry squads with a variety of upgrades, but I've also had infantry squads used against me with a variety of upgrades. Like I've been to like tournaments and stuff. And the interesting thing is, it's not quite as clear cut as you'd think it would be. So your natural instinct, my natural instinct too, is like, right, well, I'm slapping a metal gun and a las cannon on every infantry squad, and you know what? Bring back the Mordian Melter Hedge. You guys remember those videos. Long-time viewers will remember the Mordian Melter Hedge. It's just like, bring back the Mordian Melter Hedge. I am going to have so many go big or go home weapons. It's going to be glorious. It's going to be fantastic. That's the way to do it. Everything else, forget about it. All that stuff. And that was my first instinct. And let me tell you, I wasn't 100% wrong, but I wasn't 100% right either. There is definitely merit in going las cannon, melter gun, plasma pistol, let's go. There's definitely merit in that. It's just, in theory, it's the most like points efficient way of doing it. However, there is, it's not quite as effective as you might want it to be. And it's a little different. When you start taking like 18 infantry squads, that's certainly a good way to go. Don't get me wrong. If you're taking literally more than a dozen infantry squads, or between that and like maybe you're taking like a brigade, so that approach certainly works if you're going down the pure infantry route, because it doesn't matter if they're all only one-shot weapons. You've got so many of them that you've got like 18 infantry squads with las cannons. You're going to hit with 9 of them every turn, and no one really wants to get hit with 9 las cannons a turn. And with las cannons, like the big thing really is the hitting part, right? Because obviously your guard, your ballistic skills are a bit rubbish, so the hitting part's the difficult bit. But you know, if you're Acadian, so you've got sort of access to open fields of fire, and you've got you might even take like Adrian Magellan, who can like give you +1 to another squad and all this kind of stuff. You can basically rely on the fact that even with something like Demonstrator stuff, you can probably rely that you get about 9 hits a turn, which is pretty good. And so what I would say is if you're going down the pure infantry route, you certainly want to be thinking about go big or go home. Okay, certainly you want to be thinking about that. However, it's not the only way you want to be thinking, because there's another school of thought, and neither one of these schools of thought are necessarily better than the other. It's just another approach that you can take. The disadvantage of going down the go big or go home route is whilst you are taking advantage of all of the free upgrades, you're not really taking advantage of Hammer of the Emperor. Because you're unlikely to, the less shots that you roll, the less chances you're going to get 6s, the less auto wounds you're going to be getting. So the other route you go down is you go down the route of just as many shots as possible. Now obviously conscripts are great for this, but we're talking about infantry squads now, okay? And you also want to be thinking that sometimes you want infantry squads that can sit back and hold objectives, and they don't really want to be able to expose themselves to do the firepower, right? Sometimes they'll want to, but sometimes they won't. So on the total opposite end of the spectrum to the las cannon, the other big heavy weapon that I think is a real winner under the new regime is the mortar, okay? Because the mortar has the potential to get like D6 shots. Well, it has these shots. It has the potential to get 6 shots, and on average you're looking at about 3.5 to 4 shots, okay? Now, that's before you even take into account like horde armies or anything like that, and there are some hordes out there, although typically it's guard players running hordes. But even if you're running something like into like Tau, a relatively common army, you're looking there at, a minimum of 3 shots because of the blast rule. You're also going to be running into things like big blocks of Terminators. Now you might be thinking, well, obviously with big blocks of Terminators I want las cannons. It's like, well, maybe. But on the other hand, there's only so many 2+ saves they can make. Now I'm not a big fan of the only so many 2+ saves they can make approach, because as my last tournament report showed, it really... Some games that theory pans out, and some games your opponent just rolls all the 2-up saves. It just happens. But it depends on what your preferred method is. But if you just go for as many shots as possible, the other route is you're just forcing as many saves as possible. So how would you do that? You can look at things like grenade launchers. You can look at things like mortars. You can look at things like plasma guns. You can look at things like heavy bolters. That's the other route you go down. Okay. Now, I personally actually think you're better taking a mortar over a heavy bolter, especially if you're fishing for Hammer of the Emperor, because the AP doesn't really matter and the strength doesn't really matter in a world of Hammer of the Emperor and Armour of Contempt, right? Likewise, with the plasma gun and the grenade launcher, I think pick whichever one you prefer here. Don't take the flamer, because the flamer doesn't roll to hit, so it can never get Hammer of the Emperor, right? Also, sniper rifles are a bad choice as well, because they need a 6 to wound to get a mortal wound, but if you get a 6 to hit, you're not getting the mortal wound, so there you go. But plasma is good because plasma is good over melter, because plasma gets more shots. You're literally doubling your chances of getting a Hammer of the Emperor off. Likewise, the grenade launcher kind of falls into the same camp as like the mortar sort of vibe, which is like, I don't care about strength, I don't care about AP, I'm just forcing as many saves as possible. What is the gun that has the chance of getting the most shots? In theory, it is the grenade launcher. Okay, in theory, that thing can get 6 shots and you're going to get a guaranteed Hammer of the Emperor. Same thing for your mortar. In theory, you get 6 shots, guaranteed Hammer of the Emperor out of that. Between the two of them, you should be getting at least 1 guaranteed Hammer of the Emperor there. Las guns are also fantastic. When it comes to like orders and stuff now, you basically just want to be looking at like first rank fire, second rank fire. If you're going down this route, right? If you're going down this overwhelming, as many Hammer of the Emperors, overwhelm the saves route, you just want to be doing first rank fire, second rank fire every squad without really even thinking about it. Unless you need to do like a move or forwards to the Emperor or something like that, or get back in the fight. You of course just want to be, you know, it's first rank fire, second rank fire, because then what you're looking at is roughly 4 shots from every model in that squad. You look at, and don't forget your heavy weapon team can still fire the las gun, as well as fire the mortar. So you're not missing out on anything there. So you're looking at 4 shots per dude, and you also got to think about the sergeant, because the sergeant, you could give him the plasma pistol. That's definitely an option. Could give him a bolter. You know? Could give him a bolter. That's 2 more shots. So when you actually look at this, and if you're just fishing for Mayhem the Emperor, you might come back to me and say, but Morning Glory, if everyone's getting 4 shots anyway, why wouldn't I just take las guns? Why would I just take las guns? And that is a really, really good point, and I wouldn't actually dispute that. The 2 small counter arguments I would make is this. Firstly, las guns have 4 shots at close range. You're not always going to be at close range. So in those situations where you're not in rapid fire range, the mortar and the grenade launcher have the advantage. Okay, that's where the heavy weapons and the heavy bolter has the advantage. You know, that's where that sits. And the second thing is that it's good to have flexibility. It's good to have variety. You know, I've talked about this in some of my other tactics videos, but it's good to be able to have tools in the toolbox. And las guns are fantastic. Don't get me wrong; they're really, really powerful now. They've had a real breath of life. But as I said at the beginning, sometimes you're going to want that infantry squad to sit on an objective, but you still wanted to contribute to the fight. It's got a mortar. You know, it's not a huge factor, but it is a factor you're going to want to consider. So those are kind of the 2 sort of schools of thoughts at the moment. Now, if I was running a hybrid list, and I was running something along the lines of 3 to 4 Legion Russes, 2 to 3 artillery pieces, and some mortars and other support units, and then about 120, 150 infantry, about half of which is conscripts, about half of which is regular infantry squads. My thoughts there would be, if I'm to offer, even if you're just taking all infantry squads in that situation, you've got about 120 infantry there. My thoughts there, you go down the as many shots as possible route, and the reason for that is you've already got big guns. Right, you've got basilisks, you've got manticores, you've got tank commanders, you've got big guns. They're the ones that are doing the heavy lifting, and your infantry squads are just there to just force as many wounds to pepper them up nicely. So in that case, you go down the plasma route, the bolter route. You go down the mortar route, the heavy bolter route. That's what the grenade launch route. That's the route you go down there. However, if you're going the pure infantry route, I think you're probably better off going down the go big or go home route. Bring back that Mordian melter hedge. Have a nice mix of las cannons, plasma, melter, plasma pistol on the sergeant, power sword on the sergeant, voxcaster, all that. That's the route you want to go down. Now you mix it up, and you may find half and half is perfect. Don't just stick to one. Don't just be like, Morning Glory said need 18 las cannons, I'm taking 18 las cannons. Yeah. I mean, you'll never need another las cannon for your infantry squad ever again. You'll be future-proofed out of the wazoo. But try what works for you. Go and try what works for you. And when you have tried what works for you, come back here and put it in the comment section. Because then we'll all get to learn. Okay? Because this is based off my experience. But what I really like from you guys is that everyone goes and tries things out and experiments. We all come together as a community. We put things in the comment section and we go, Morning Glory, you were totally right about that mortar situation. All my demolisher cannons are doing all the killing. My mortars get to do all the harassing. It's fantastic. Or you'll come back and go, Morning Glory, in the age of the Terminator, mortars just don't cut it. It's like, okay, fine, we know that now based on your experience, and I know, and we gather this little knowledge hub together. So go and find things out. Let me know and come back. But this is what I'm telling you based on my experience of using these different loadouts and of these different loadouts being used against me as well. So that's it for today. Hope you've enjoyed today's video. If you have, please consider heading on over to the Patreon page. This channel, I cannot state it enough, it literally lives and dies on the Patreon support. Okay? Advertisements don't bring in nearly enough or anything like that. If without the channel patrons, I wouldn't be able to go to different tournaments, I wouldn't be able to go to different clubs, try out different tactics and different metas and all this kind of stuff, and bring that first-hand knowledge back to you guys. I just wouldn't be able to do it without my Patreon support. So if you want to support the channel, please head on over to the Patreon page, there's a link down in the description below, and of course, a huge, heartfelt thank you to all of the current Patreon supporters. You guys know how important you are to me. I make a bigger and bigger deal out of you every single video because you guys just are fantastic. I cannot make a big enough deal out of my Patreon supporters. So massive thank you to everyone who's a Patreon supporter. Thank you to everyone who's watched this video. And of course, I'll see you guys next time.